Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. So, as I do this video, we all know that the COVID-19 is gripping America, gripping many countries around the world, and pretty much slowing down everything in the world. Orders today from the State Department that no more visas at this point will be issued at any U.S. consulate. And so, because of that order, I think a lot of people are going to think, well, just stop the whole process right now and don't go forward until the order is lifted. Well, I mean, it will be lifted at some point, and I think you want a deeper understanding of the process of how it ends up where you are at an interview at the U.S. consulate. It just doesn't happen. There are certain visas which do not need to be approved at the USCIS in the United States beforehand, but for the vast majority of visas, whether they are immigrant or non-immigrant, they do need to go through the United States USCIS first. So let me just give you an example. Let's say that you have a business work visa. Let's just say an H-1B. So the H-1B first has to be prepared and filed and submitted to USCIS in the United States. It has to go to the proper service center. They need to adjudicate it. If in fact they're missing something or they are unclear on something, which to be honest is the majority of the case, you will get an RFE or request for evidence. That request for evidence will then need to be responded to. And then after that, if it's approved, you'll get the approval of the H-1B. And again, I'm just saying H-1B for argument's sake. It could be the L-1, it could be the R, whatever it is. And then what will happen is once the approval is made, you assumably will have designated where you're going to have the interview. So then it takes time for them to forward the official approval to the U.S. consulate or embassy where you are. Then it gets forwarded. Once it's there, then you need to fill out, and again, this is for a non immigrant visa. You need to fill out the non immigrant visa application, need to go online, make an appointment, and that's going to take a while. And then ultimately and eventually, you will be at the interview for, in this case, the H-1B. But before you go there, assuming you had an immigration attorney do it, he or she will have sent you the petition. You will have reviewed everything and know it backward and forward, because you don't go to an interview unprepared, because it is the right of the officer being under Department of State to deny the H-1B, even though the USCIS under the Department of Justice approved it. So it's like you have to go through two approvals. So the bottom line here is that with a non-immigrant visa, it does take a long time in which to, and a lot of preparation in which to ultimately get it to the point where you're going to schedule an interview. And likewise, if you're doing a petition for the green card, that takes even longer. And, I could talk about either employment or family, but let's do the easier one. Let's say it's a family petition. Well, first, there's the petition to classify the family members. That goes, again, to the service center, USCIS in the United States. That needs to be processed. It takes time for that to go forward. And then, of course, depending what the preference is, the visa priority date might take a long time to become current. Once it is current, it's transferred to the NVC, which is the National Visa Center inside the United States. It then gets a second processing over in that organization. A lot of it has to do with affidavits of support and public charges and things like that. And then once that's all done, keeping in mind the whole way that they could issue RFEs or notices to deny, where you have to respond. But assuming all that gets approved, then it will ultimately get sent to the U.S. consulate for processing. And again, now we're talking about for the green card family-based petition. And once it gets over there, you need to fill out a whole application in which to present to them at the time of the interview. And of course, that takes time, and you need to get your medicals, your criminal check. You need to do all of that. And then ultimately, there will be an interview. So, as you can see, the actual interview at the consulate is the smallest of the procedures necessary in order to ultimately come into the US. It's very important, of course, but it is the smallest of time to go forward. So, if you're planning on going forward with an immigration petition, you shouldn't just stop in your tracks and not do anything, because if you can get all of the legwork done and the processing and the RFEs answered and the approvals and the transferring to the consulate, then at least it will be sitting there ready for the interview once the ban is, once this is lifted and once everything can go forward, rather than waiting for it to be lifted, then starting from square one. And then, 6 months to a year later, you're at the interview. You could save all that time now. Okay, if you like the video, click like, subscribe, and more on the coming videos. Thank you.